So anyway, I will just start. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, attendees who are still joining as well. We should have Nigel here, but I will just crack on. So welcome to Premier Sports Network's new webinar series. It brings together experts from across the world of sport to discuss aspects of finance and player welfare. Now, sessions run live every Thursday at 2 o'clock. They are available to download as a podcast, and your questions are very, very welcome. There's a Q&A box. Please don't put those questions in chat though, as they will get lost. So in today's episode, we're focusing on managing players from home during this time. And joining me to discuss this topic from their own perspectives are Haughan, General Manager, First Team Operations at Liverpool, Matteo Fabris, Team Manager at Juventus, and shortly, Nigel Pearson, Manager at Watford. Now, firstly, welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you are keeping safe and well. Before we start, again as last week when we discussed the financial implications of an overdrawn season due to coronavirus, I just want to address the fact that whatever we say here, we say it with a full understanding that health and safety of fans, players, staff is absolutely paramount to any discussion that we have around football at this time. I'm sure you guys agree with me on that one.
Yeah.
And before we get to Q&A, you've supported Premier Sports Network since the beginning in 2015. You've spoken at the invite-only events that they run. So just briefly, without giving away too many of your trade secrets, how important is it for you and your own personal development to learn from clubs overseas or other sports when it comes to implementing new ideas? And how has the network helped your role and development in any way? Ray, can I get you to start with that?
Okay, good one. We didn't practice that one, Georgie. So for me, I think it's important that I've never met Matteo before, which is great. We're going to have a hook up online after here, see how they work, see how we work. It's good to share ideas. I always believe if you go into a conference or a webinar or anything and you learn one thing, then that's great. You can bring it back to your club or your business. I think it's very easy to become so immersed in your own club, in your own business, and you think you're working so hard that you have everything right, that you've checked every box correctly. But I think that just lifting yourself out of your own environment, listening to other people, all within their own sports or different sports also as well, because you meet good people on the sports network out of cycling, motor racing, American football, all these different sports. If you can pick something out and then transfer it back into your environment that makes you that little bit better, then for me that's why it's a plus. And that's why I encourage myself and my staff to try and take part in these webinars, to go to the meetings and just have a good networking relationship with as many people as possible.
Okay.
For me, the personal development is paramount, and I'm reading more books and attending webinar, attending conferences about not really just team management or but also about performance, about athletic, about medical stuff, so I can learn better how our team and the team that I manage as a team manager, so mostly the physical trainers, the coaches, and also the sanitary staff and the doctors are working to integrate people and try to take the more time I can out of my work to learn, listen, because at the end, you have to listen first. So learn to listen is a paramount, is the first thing to go through and keep it with the humble approach that you still have to learn a lot of things. So different sports are filling me. I'm going through all the Prime Video sports, all that series that I can see in these days, reading books and taking this time to improve myself. And of course, after our organization, and try to share it with my different teammates and also some players sometimes. So it's very nice.
Well, I want to focus more on what you've all been doing. I mean, before we get on to what the players and how they're all managing this, how are you adapting to working from home? What your normal day looks like now? Nigel, welcome, by the way. I'll start by posing that to you. What does your normal day look like now?
I suppose, like many people, it's completely different. I mean, look, I think one of the most important aspects of trying to function still in a professional sense when you are in the situation that we're all in now is, I think, your ability to have an open enough mind and a creative enough mindset that we do what we can to overcome the problems. I mean, communication at any point in a football club is one of the key aspects of maximizing what you have. Now, whether that's on the playing field or the functioning of a business in general is maximized really if you are able to communicate. Now, this clearly puts us in a very difficult situation, just because you know, I mean, personally, I like to have face-to-face contact with people. I'm very I like to be visible at the training ground. So this is a polar opposite of how I would like to work, of course. But you know, I mean, if you just look at what the problems are, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's really important that you try and find different ways of communicating and still have a positive mindset in terms of trying to achieve some sort of an outcome. At the moment, of course, there's a lot of unknowns in terms of whether the Premier League or any of the leagues will restart. That's a huge question mark. And so how you keep if we're talking about for the players, for instance, how they keep a level of fitness is a challenge in itself. But you know, we as a football club and we as staff and are trying to find our ways to still keep in contact with each other and be ready for any eventuality. And I think that's the important aspect, really. So my days at the moment, to go back to your original question, are because the weather's all right, it's rather nice. We have to try and fill our times in constructive ways. So for me, to try and do some work, it's very much to work remotely is quite a challenge for somebody like myself, who's a practical based person. So it's not easy, but the most important thing is that when we are in a position where we're able to go back to work in some sort of normality, that we are ready for it.
Well, there's a lot in what Nigel just said there, Ray, but communication is key, but also at such an uncertain time. How are you keeping the lines of communication open at this time?
From the garden.
Perfect.
I have to say that we have, you know, you have all the normal channels, you have a lot of phone calls. I think if you ask 99% of the population in the UK, everyone's now got to terms with Zoom, Teamworks, everything, which probably we wouldn't use before. So we have quite a lot of those. All the fitness guys for the clubs are using them for all the players to do sessions, etc. For myself, I have started using Zoom and Teamworks a lot more in terms of how we can chat, which I will take also as a positive when we go back, because I'm a little bit like Nigel, and I think a lot of people in football are very much face-to-face people, very much hands-on, very much that's how the environment dictates towards that. But what you have to be careful of is overloading. And I think you can, because everyone's so keen to help and all the different departments want to help out. So you have to be careful not to overload your end client, which is normally the players in our environment. So we channel everything through either one WhatsApp group, or we have our own internal setup, which is called Teamworks, and we use that as an app. Just anything professional, anything work-wise, all goes on that. We're dealing with the PFA, the Premier League, everything, so as not to duplicate what goes to the players. So I think a lot of people, the companies are doing mental health, etc., etc. So we've channeled all that into myself. I filter it all out and act as a a bounce off sort of, and then we just send into the players what's actually required, and then we'll deal with the external companies and say to PFA, we've sent this out, etc. or not.
Forgive me, Gray, but what was your day-to-day before looking like, and compared to now? It sounds like all you're doing is online, which a lot of us feel like we're doing at the moment, from the garden, of course. But yeah, what was your day-to-day? What was your role specifically?
So I'm operations manager for the first team. So anything in terms of travel, security, anything the managers, coaches want to implement, anything the nutrition, anything off pitch that needs to come together, pre-season, training camps, cup competitions, European games, etc. Just pulling all that information together and then just feeding it out into the players or other members of staff, to the internal clients.
Matteo, for you, how's life changed?
It has changed a lot, because I decided to switch to a more direct communication, because before, meeting the people every day, communicating with them was just sending more messages as a reminder. So information flow from myself, as more or less as Ray is doing during the normal working day, meeting people in the corridor and talk a while, waiting for the training session to be over, to be able to dip some meeting with a head-to-head and face-to-face meeting with every single part of the team, players and the staff, which is growing the last years so much, so they need support, more support. And for this reason, now Haughan has switched. I am honestly now more focused on how players are reacting to this situation. So only phone calls, no messages, if I can. Direct contact by, not really with video calls, but more talking with players. And we experience that every single call is lasting 20, 30 minutes. Which before, normally the same call with the same information, amount of information was a kind of 2-3 minutes. So I'm struggling to also to get in touch with people, because their phone, they're always busy. So sometimes with my bosses, the meeting at the end of the day are around midnight, where every phone is free. So I can get in touch with people without waiting to be recalled, like it was struggling to find the line with them. But we and the team also, we had a case of 3 positive to COVID players. So the management of those players, so players that went abroad, was a difficult, and the thing is that really, in this real situation, every person is the same outside football, but every person reacted in a different way. Every person has different concern. And when you think about team as a group who is doing almost more or less the same things at that time in the day, so one training started at, in this case, for every player, there is a different way of perceiving this reality, a different way to live with this situation. And also from the psychological point of view, it's really challenging for everyone in a different way. So the individual relationship raise, it's more important now, but after, it's really complicated. If you miss a player for 3-4 days, then you miss the feeling with him. And so for this reason, in the last month and a half, I put my energy more on players than on staff, which are grown people. So I have different reactions and different way to focus and to face this challenge, this new challenge.
Nigel, I could ask you how players are coping, but Matteo just pointed out there, everyone will be dealing with this differently. And there's so many things that they have to deal with, the information overload that you've already spoken about, but also the media pressure, for good and for bad, that's been coming out. We know what that is. Is this testing you as a manager, every skill you've had, the psychology, the team management, to deal with individual players, but also maintain that team mentality?
Simple answer is, at the moment, it's very difficult, I think, to gauge accurately how the players will have coped with it by the time we come back. But we work in a team sport, but I think it's very clear that everybody has their own personality, and some players, you know, the circumstances in which they find themselves in will be, again, like everybody in the population, it will be varied. We'll have some players who are a long way from home and their families, players who are from abroad who worry about their families at home, but might be very resilient individuals themselves. You know, the needs of the player are different. I think, look, I think getting the balance right between giving players the right level of support, but also accepting that there is only a limited amount of real support that we can give them at the moment. It's getting the balance right. It's giving them enough information. It's trying to keep them engaged. It's trying to keep them in a calm enough mindset so that they're not. I mean, look, we have to keep everything that we do in context. This is our job, but there are bigger issues at the moment, and I think that is always something that we have to remember, that our players are members of the population like everybody else, and there will be an element of concern that they're concerned for themselves, they're concerned for their families. In a purely work head, it's just trying to keep them ticking over so that when we do resume, and whether that is finishing off the season that we're currently in, and the longer it goes on, I think that becomes less likely, or we start back for a new season. And whatever the scenario is, we've got to be prepared to try and pick up not where we left off, but we have to be prepared to work back with the players, and it could be in a different type of environment, because, you know, we're not going to go from a situation where we're currently in lockdown to all of a sudden everything being back to normal. I think anybody who's got that sort of a picture in their mind is probably going to be a little bit disappointed. I think at the moment, there's so much uncertainty in terms of what the future is going to look like, that we've got to we have to stay calm enough and as I said, play our role in the way that we can. I mean, how we function just as a football operation at the moment is, you know, the medical department have a weekly meeting. You know, players on a normal day at work, for instance, will have favoured members of staff that they talk to in the medical room, etc. You know, all we've tried to do as staff is encourage our staff to keep in contact with the players that they're close to. We also have players who are currently recovering from injuries, which again is a bit of a challenge in terms of keeping that sort of level of care going for them. We have a weekly.
A little bit more, Nigel, about the fitness aspect in a while. Can I go back in terms? Just talk to Ray a little bit, because we've got a question here from Mike, and I think a lot of people are wanting to know about the sort of welfare, because, as you said, Matteo, at the start, everybody's going through this. This is how you deal with it in your own time and space. This has been very different for different people, but it is an incredibly unusual situation, incredibly frightening situation as well. So how are you dealing with sort of approach to mental health and welfare of players? Mike's asked the question, welfare of players, obviously a big concern at this current time. And the PFA just last week saying they'd seen a spike in players seeking mental health support. So what type of support and initiatives are you, Ray, putting in place at your club to help players?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Nigel's just said there, and I think sometimes as well, it's just within our industry, we tend to think of the players as football players, but they're also fathers, sons, brothers, husbands. They have a lot of family around them, have family in different countries, as Nigel said. Some of the guys are unfortunate, maybe if they live in apartments by themselves. We're quite lucky in the Northwest where we have a little bit more space, and most of our players have gardens, so they can be outside, do the ball work, take the families out. I don't. That might be different in London. That might be different. I think it's quite different in Europe as well, where it's a very apartment sort of living society. Whereas here, so we're quite okay on that side. In terms of, what was the question again? I'm sorry, we're going to track.
What initiatives are you putting in place? How is this changing the way that perhaps you're approaching player welfare, mental health welfare of players? What are you actually doing? Are they speaking to anybody at the moment? Are they?
Well, I think there's different ways of looking at it. We have a psychologist in-house who's doing regular calls with players. The PFA offer a very, very good service. There's, as Nigel said, players have favourite members of staff within the club. They can act as psychologists. It's just about sometimes just being able to speak to somebody who you trust. A lot of the time within the business, it might be a friend, it might be a different colleague. In terms of the players that are by themselves, the foreign players, we're trying to use our contact with them much more vocal on the telephone, FaceTime calls, as opposed to WhatsApps, as opposed to emails. We're trying to get them a little bit more involved in that side of things, so they feel still continuously as part of the internal community that we've built up within the club, which I'm sure everyone else is doing. But I think you have to also remember that these guys, as Nigel said, they'll be worried possibly more about the children, their mothers, their fathers, etc., who are locked away in other countries many times, or different cities for sure. So I think that when we go to the player, it's not just about them. I think you have to be able to offer that support, that they can speak about the rest of the family and what really is worrying them.
I just want to open this up to Ben Smith, if that's all right. We'll see if this this works. Ben, you have a question that you want to ask them from the EFL, Ben?
He's on mute.
Is he there? Well, we'll try and get that.
A bit loud.
He's on mute, George.
Well, I can't seem to get her anyway, so I will see if I can unmute him. But it was questions along those lines about.
Oh, hello.
The board. So I'll try. Oh, Ben is talking.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, can you?
There you go. It wasn't on mute. I think
No, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of touched a little bit on this with players that come from different countries. Have you experienced players that have gone back to their native country, and how have you dealt with any of the challenges that might have brought, such as time difference, safety, medical, training resources, that kind of thing?
Ray, do you want to take that one?
Oh, that's a good one for Nigel. We've had a couple of players go back overseas to be near their families during this time. You are obviously monitoring their travel aspects when you need to bring them back, in terms of whenever we come back, government advice pending. We need to know where their hospitals are, what the actual coronavirus is in their country, what scale they're at, what time they're at. Will you bring them back prior? Will they stay a little bit longer? You know, we have our medical team speak with them every day. In terms of the time differences, we're quite lucky, touch wood. All our players have gone to a good time difference, so that when we're having our group sessions, they're always on there as well. So again, it's just going back to keeping them in the community, keeping them within the player area, and keeping them going, whilst also providing support around them.
Nigel?
We've got two players, one who's currently injured and one who's currently on loan abroad, and they're really the only two who have travelled. We've had a couple of members of staff who, for family reasons, have returned to their homelands. When the initial lockdown occurred, we basically tried to prevent, or we advised players not to travel, and so which in some ways is a difficult decision because, you know, I think it's natural for some players to want to return home. But I think we have to be sensible with this. You can have a blanket decision to say let's not travel abroad, but then you've still got to have an empathetic feel to how you deal with situations, you know. And so clearly, if a player has a member of their family in difficulty, then it would be something that we'd look at. But for the most part, what we've tried to do is not travel because we all have a duty and a responsibility to behave in the same way that everybody else in the country is doing at the moment, and that is to limit the amount of contact that we have with other people to try and get to grips with this pandemic. So, you know, I mean, it's just being sensible as much as anything. As the way I see it is, we have a duty of care to our players and our staff members to make sure that their well-being is really at the forefront of our minds at all time. I mean, we're talking about athletes here. There will be an element of deconditioning. Again, some players, I know because speaking to some of the players, for them to keep the fitness going has actually been something that they've been very thankful for, because it gives them focus during the day. It gives them opportunities.
Really structured in terms of the fitness, or are you giving them a bit more freedom? What is it looking like?
No. We give them. They have a program each week that is updated and what we ask them to do is to then send us we download all the data and give them feedback on where they are now. But again, they're all different, you know. So some will be more methodical and more structured than others. For me, I don't see that as being a huge, you know, I don't get hung up about control over people. I think what we have to remember is that they're all trying to cope with a situation in which, for some of them, and anybody who works in football will know that some players are really easy, low maintenance, easy to manage, and some are more difficult. But you know, it's not something to get hung up about. I mean, the modern player now is a lot more self-aware in terms of the physical demands. Players understand that they have to be competitive in the modern game. Certainly in the top flight, you've got to be able to meet the physical requirements. So I think players are a lot more clued in and a lot more self-aware. I think that the big issue for me at the moment is their overall well-being, their mental health is a very important aspect for all of us in life, and it's something that you don't have the level of control over with other people. So what you've got to try and do is I think for all of us football clubs, we try and create an environment which allows the players to seek help if they need to. And you know, players will have their own sports psychologists sometimes themselves. Clubs have sports psychologists and utilize them in different ways. There's no one size fits all for this. You know, we'll have different ways of utilizing the toolbox, if you like. So, you know, at the moment, I think what's important is that the players have points of contact, different types of contact at the football club, because, you know, people in positions of authority, the very fact that you do have authority can put up barriers sometimes of communication. And I think it's important to allow the players to communicate with the people that they are most comfortable communicating with. But ultimately for us, we've got to have a very soft touch in terms of how we try and keep some level of control over what's happening with our players. But I mean, but you have to be realistic about it as well.
Matteo, are you taking a similar approach? So no sanctions if they don't turn up to Zoom training sessions. Also, I do want to ask you, because we've got a question from Kunal saying, what plans are being put into place if players decide they don't want to come back to the club or they don't want to start playing again because of fear of catching coronavirus? So 2 issues there about how you're handling players.
In Italy, we had the problem that we were the first country affected by the coronavirus pandemic stream of virus in the last 2 months. So, of course, the country was felt as unsafe by a lot of people, but we have 13 different nationalities in our roster within the 23 players that are in the first team of Juventus. So for this reason, some of them, of course, felt this place as unsafe. Mm-hmm. Then in a month, they discovered that all the world is not as safe as the safe place it was before. So for this reason, this approach has changed. But for this reason also, we from the beginning, we were consulting our team psychologist every day and really sometimes every day, sometimes on a weekly basis with our board to get the best advice to see these developing situation, because from the first day of the lockdown in Italy to until today, a lot has changed. The awareness of the season of the situation by everyone is different, and also the fear that everyone has for the family situation, everything has changed. For this reason, we allowed players to go abroad, come back to their homes, because this was the place they felt more safe. Mm-hmm. And of course, we understood that helping them with the workout routine helped them a lot to find a normal time management in the day, as some of us also is doing home, as suggested by most people. And the players sometimes struggle to fall asleep without working out. So they also need workout because they are athletes that need this workout to get also the normal sleep they have. So for them was also a need to keep working out. And of course, with our conditioning coach, they organized with video calls and different groups, also because of the different time zones, because some of them are in South America. And for this reason, players from my club, of course, in the first team, has the benefit that most of them can enjoy a different is isolation, because most have gardens, spaces, and big houses. And for this reason, of course, they can take the best out of it where they feel home. So of course they will come back for the normal trainings, but also in Italy, the football is we are pending the government advice to the FA to start the training back, and all those training will be coming back. And when the situation will allow the clubs to come back training, it will not be normal. This is clear. The world would have changed and it would be different for the next months. And also, even if we can start back training, it will be a different way of trainings. It will be the daily routine will help us to find a second way to make it a little more normal, this different difficult situation, but it would be weird, and for everyone it would take an individual approach, and would be the empathic part and sharing the same situation, because we are all on the same boat as in the world, in our society, in the country, but also within the club, will also help to make the best possible choices together, because we will share. We've decided to be clear and true with everyone from the beginning, to explain really the situation it is. It is out of control, our control. So we will wait and be very fair and more clear with everyone that we can.
It's very hard to do though, Ray, isn't it? I mean, Matteo's talked there about what happens when people return to training, but we've got some questions. So Matthew says, will extra measures have to be put in place when football returns to protect players and staff in light of the current situation? Then also a question as well, as is the case with most pandemics, and I don't assume you're an epidemiologist here, but we'll ask you this anyway, there is a possibility of a second wave of the virus, of course, coming along. And in this scenario, supposing we assume that football is called off for the rest of 2020, who knows what's going to happen, and what could be the potential implications on your club? I mean, the situation is so uncertain because of the nature of it. Ray, how are you handling that?
It's an open question, I have to say.
You have plenty of opportunity to find where you want to talk about. No, well, let's start with the sort of when it returns. What are you putting in? What extra measures are you going to put in to protect players and staff?
I think a lot will come from the government. A lot. I know all the doctors from all the Premier League clubs are having regular meetings, regular updates with the Premier League, so that we all have quite the same level of how we come back, how we do our training sessions. I think it's one of those, Georgie, we're playing it by ear. I think it's also saying, people are saying, oh, can you plan for the future? Well, for me, we're in a holding pattern at the moment, where we're just keeping, as Nigel said, we're just keeping people ticking along, hoping they're in a good place, keeping them going mentally, keeping them going with the fitness to a certain level. And I think that you have to plan for so many different scenarios, because you just don't know. So it'd be remiss of me to try and give you one answer to that, where there can be 10, 12 different scenarios. And until we get more advice from the government, and will be dictated from then in the first instance, from the Premier League and from the club doctors, as to how we can go back. That can take any shape. It might be, it's not going to be, yes, everyone can come back. But you see in Germany, the training in pairs. They've got different time schedules throughout the day. So these two are in with one member of staff for an hour. The next group are in, next two are in with another member of staff. So you've got so many different scenarios. I'm not too sure I can unfortunately give a straight answer, because I don't think anybody actually knows.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We have no idea whether we're going to be able to restart the season. What and if we do, what is it going to look like? But in terms of contingency plans, Ray, for any players who are out of contract, perhaps before the season starts, I mean, either end of contract or a loan deal, especially, you know, if the decision to finish this year's season goes into July. I mean, what are you saying there?
I think, yeah, that's a good one. I think that would be for the Premier League to speak with the clubs and the ownership and the sporting directors. And I think that'll be a question very much geared towards them. And it'll have to almost, if you think about it logically, it might, whatever happens, will have to be a blanket, so that everyone has the same fair rules and fair footing to play on, to be honest with you.
Matteo, I would just ask you about social media, just very quickly. For good and for bad, how are you managing players' use of social media? Do you see it as a good thing? We've also got a question here about, given the fact that you're not playing live matches, are you leaning on your players a little bit more in terms of marketing than you would, in other words, and therefore their social media presence is a boon for the club?
We had some video organized through the YouTube video channel of Juventus with former players meeting and maybe interviews, and those are the activity we did until now. So some interviews, some this kind of activity official for not to maximize the exposure of our partners, but most of the clubs would face a lot of problems, which are, of course, also related to the fact that all the partners haven't the visibility they had in the past, or they should have in those months. So it's all now. We have some activities, but most things are suspended. And of course, some of the players will use the social media individually for their own, as they did before. But in the void of the rest of football, without the matches, so some of those use of the social media appears more than it did in the past, because we are all linked to our mobile phone more than we did in the past months. So it's really try to understand, and then try to find still to find a way, because everything is going on but suspended. Until now, it's a mix of what happens during the summer break and what happened before a pre-season, before the pre-season plan in terms of planning, but still we don't have any date or when we will be able to come back. So having not this date, everything, we cannot consider this break of activity as in any case, as an holiday for the head of the people involved in. We, as I mentioned, as most of us, I think, the participants of the webinar can find the struggle to sleep. I had it in the past weeks, because sometimes the overflow of information is deadly to trying to find the sleep, because everyone is thinking about is the future of his family, or of himself, and the future of the job. So it's a very the situation deals a lot of has a lot of similar points with the management of post-traumatic stress disease. There's a common to when you have wars or a soldier at wars, but it will be different for everyone, as it is in those cases. So try to get and study what happened in the past with the similar cases in the society, will help us also to understand how we have to deal with afterwards. Because of course, government will give to clubs guidelines to respect in terms of training, in terms of what we have to respect. I think that top flight clubs are ready to receive and invest all the relevant energies, money to make every guidelines happens. But after there are people that maybe have a fear to pass the ball one to the other, or take a head with the balls that is has been touched from somebody else. You don't know what will happen until the first day. You should be very calm, meticulous, understanding people, listening, and discover together, and watching the faces and staring people in the eyes to understand the real feeling, because this is what now we are missing. So this kind of feeling that no telephone, no video call can substitute, but the meet people, watching them in their eyes, not having the possibility to hug them again, because you have to keep the social distance, but sharing the same place at the same time, it will be the start of something. So it's really, I think that as a human being, this crisis will make us a lot better than we were, maybe, because we will focus on people, and after on things to do and how we will do things, but first on people. So that should be the right way to do things, but it's challenging, but it will also open ourselves to the others. in a real way.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. Nigel, I want to focus a little bit more on what it's like you working on, you know, what Matteo was talking about there in terms of there's so much uncertainty here. But when, you know, there's one thing talking about fitness, there's a complete other thing to talk about match fitness. And you have to be pretty ready to hit the ground running, as it were, for when and if this season, or, you know, assuming football will start again, I'm assuming that at some stage. What is your exit strategy looking like in terms of getting players match fit, ready?
Yeah, okay. Georgie, I've just had a look at some of the questions that have been typed in and asked as well. So I'll try and sort of give you an answer which answers that, but brings one or two answers into those questions. And you know, one of the questions was about at the moment, are there any tactical sort of elements being discussed with the players? In all honesty, no, I'm not. I wouldn't suggest that everybody's going to do the same thing. We had a staff meeting via this type of medium the other day, and we were talking about looking at the preparation again for games, and is it worth at this moment trying to bring something together on that. And we just decided that the relevance of any work that we do now may not be relevant in a few weeks' time. So in terms of, I think it's really important to focus your energy on what you can actually affect. And at the moment, our own focus is to try and give some sort of direction to our players. And so I think one of the most difficult things that the players individually will find at the moment is the fact that there is no endpoint, there is no definitive date that we're aiming for. And so if you, for planning for, so there's a question talking about the duration of how you're going to get them match ready. And really, if you're planning a pre-season, you work back from the date of the first game and put those building blocks in place. Now, as it stands at the minute, regardless of when our next starting point is, and they've been muted about that, maybe we'll try and get the league going again sometime in early June, for instance. If we use that as a starting point, we're already at this stage where there will be elements of detraining. So the conditioning that you get on the training field, playing a contact sport in a team environment, is going to be very different to what players can do at the moment individually to keep themselves fit. So there is going to be whatever the period of time is from us agreeing or we're being told that we can start training again to when the first games are again. There's going to be an element of whether it's a mini pre-season or whether it looks like a normal pre-season, which could be, you know, like a 6-week training block. But the very fact that we don't have a date to work towards, that everybody understands what it is, it just leaves things so much up in the air. And so really what you've got to do is it, in many ways, in terms of the fitness side of it, it's damage limitation. We've got to make sure that the players' overall well-being is looked after first. And so in terms of their physical fitness, in my experience, the modern player, again, I mean, pre-seasons aren't these days like they were 20, 30 years ago, where you came back to get fit. Players retain a level of fitness which allows them to progress during pre-seasons pretty quickly. And you know, I'm personally a big believer in the players being introduced to the ball on day one in pre-season, personally. But there still has to be the conditioning period that then flows into more game-related training sessions. Clubs will do it differently. Managers and coaches have different ideas and philosophies. So there's no one answer which is going to be the right one. But what we try to do is you know, we are science-based, like a lot of football clubs these days. We are very keen to have players available, or I certainly am. I don't want injured players, and so injury prevention is and again, the modern player understands the necessity for himself to keep himself in the best condition. And so, you know, I think the main problems that we're going to have are the social issues when we start back, because I think the players will very quickly come up to speed in terms of their physical capabilities, for sure.
No, not
But
the social issues and all that sort of thing, but I imagine the difficult ones are going to be a lot of legal issues. And as you're the brave guy, I think you're probably going to be answering this from me, if you would. The conversations regarding salary reductions, deferrals, all these sorts of issues, agents, all the kind of horrible issues that are going to come up. You know, players who are contract. How are your club? How are you dealing with that?
Okay, so just this sort of issue to start with, I think it was a real shame the way that it was. I didn't like the fact that the players as a group, as a whole, throughout the whole of the country, were, if you like, made an example of by a politician. I think it was the wrong way to do it. Again, players, all clubs are different. I think players will be doing, or would like to do, and probably are doing themselves quite a bit off their own backs to support the NHS. I think what we're looking at here with deferrals is to generalize now, is because, again, this is such an open-ended argument. We don't know where it's going at the moment. I think it's more to protect the game and protect the interests of the game and the clubs that players play for. So again, there's no point in me generalizing on this too much, because my own opinion won't necessarily be something which other people agree with, and different clubs will be doing things for different reasons, for sure. And some of it will be to protect themselves as a business. You know, I mean, at the moment, everybody's, it's the industry's stopped, and you know, there is a real risk of clubs going out of business. I think that will, and we don't, again, at the moment, we don't know how big a problem that is going to be, but for sure, it's going to be a difficulty moving forward. I don't like the fact that players are singled out as, you know, they should do it. We have again, use the phrase, we have a duty of care, if you like, to the industry. I think it's important that the industry recognizes the threat that we're currently under, and there are going to be some massive financial implications for individual clubs and for the game in general, I'm sure. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it is.
Okay, we're going to wrap up, but so I want to just ask, I'm going to focus first, Ray, is what you've learned since lockdown, what are you going to be taking forward from this period into the future?
I think you can look at it two ways, personally and professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Professionally, and I would imagine everyone can look at it in two ways. Professionally, I think I will use more mediums like this to have discussions, save a lot of time. I think once you get comfortable with it, you can use it a lot for your time management in the future. You don't have to be here, there, and everywhere. You can actually do this. I think that picking that up moving forward, we can use it more internally within our internal sites, and you can use it externally with that. Personally, I've learned another part I wanted to touch on, that when you asked Matthias about the clubs and what they can do with the social media, I think one thing that's quite important, and I'd just like to touch on it really briefly, I think that with the players, and their social media and all the digital media, press, PR teams within the clubs, it's incredible how much work they can do within the communities, and how much I've seen just simple things by players, by staff, really affecting care homes, hospitals, individuals, groups of people. So Nigel said that players are doing a lot behind the scenes, and a lot of this goes unspoken or unseen, but from what I've seen, I watched something from a Manchester City, fan engagement, all these kind of things. We can't forget that the clubs are also doing this as well. So I just wanted to mention that on the back of what Nigel said, if you don't mind.
No, of course.
As a person, I think I realise you can wear your pajamas all day. Now, as a person, I think you sort of, for the first time ever, it's such an environment that we all work in, that it's not so much a job, it becomes a way of life, and you never really get the opportunity at any stage to be able to step back from that as a human being and then have a look at your home surroundings, your relationships out of work. And I think it gives you a chance to take a deep breath and have a look and see, I hope I become a little bit better father over the last couple of days, that were the last few weeks, so personally, I think I've grown quite a lot, and I think I've been able to look at the industry that we work in with a little bit more objective eyesight, and hopefully you will not waste time, and you'll be able to, with all the support and what we've been using, you can work smarter as opposed to harder.
Matteo, same question to you, personally, professionally, but also, what can football learn from this going forward?
It is a difficult question, but I think that football can learn a lot to keep next to people which are fighting now, and also come closer to people, because sometimes football is far from people. In the last decades, it became football of superstars also, so which is felt to be far from general public, from normal people. To the price of tickets has grown a lot, so it has became, the people attending to football matches also changed throughout the world, not in a single club. And these changes have been in the last 10 years also. This the pace of this change has been very fast. So I think that we will find ourselves and football, I think, closer to people, also because of those fundraising initiative, and football will find himself more side by side to the society. I think it's hard to tell, because really it's hard to tell. What I'm learning, maybe I will have a list of things I've learned after, because I'm still trying to understand what is happening. How can we deal it together and deal it on a personal, singular basis? But also myself, I found myself to be a better father, to spend really weeks without having matches every 3 days, so home, which I was not used to at all. So for this reason, it was an incredible discovery, because I was a part of life that I didn't live really as much as it deserved to be lived. So for most of the people that in football or outside of football are with overwork, we had some overwork, but we did it from home, which left us time to have every lunch and dinner home with our family. So it was also something new to discover. And actually, I fear to say, I am a little fear to say that I miss this. For this reason, when we will come back to the full job, I will miss that part too. Yeah. I will see. We will find a different balance between maybe work and personal life. At least it's what I hope now, in the middle of this thunder. So
absolutely. Nigel, wrap it up for us, would you?
Yeah, I will do. I've just been looking at the questions again. No, I'm not in Ibiza. Yes, we are worried about. Yes, we are worried about increased loading on players and injury prevention, and it will be a topic. I can't remember. I can't remember who asked this question about the time frame from when we can start back training to when the season starts. It's got to be a reasonable enough time. 4 weeks isn't really long enough, we don't believe. I alluded to 4 to 6 weeks. So there's going to be although, yeah, like I say, players are pretty robust these days, but yeah, to compete at the level that we expect them to play at, yeah, we are worried about picking up injuries. General question about what's this lockdown done? It just made me realise what I take for granted in life, freedom being one of them. But I've always been a positive type of person. I believe in people, and I have to say that although I don't go out very often at the moment, apart from to go and get a bit of exercise, etc. But what you do see is, for the most part, there are some idiots out there, but for the most part, I think it gives us, well, it gives me, for instance, a renewed belief in people. I think the only way for us to get through this is to try and do things right. We have to understand in the game that football is important for people, but the people are more important as far as I'm concerned. So it's about trying to stay healthy. It's about making sure that when we are allowed to work again, that we're allowed to work in a safe environment, and that's for all of us, players, staff, fans, even, you know. So it's everybody. We need to continue to do the right things to get through this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel Pearson, manager at Watford, Matteo Fabris, team manager at Juventus, Ray Haughan, general manager, first team operations at Liverpool. Thank you, everybody who put a question to the team here. Thank you. Apologies if I didn't get them in. You've got lots of hellos and good wishes. Thank you. Really enjoy. So well done, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all of you and to Premier Sport Network.